I almost didn't make it that time. I maximized my window instead of minimizing it. I misclicked a little bit, and I almost didn't get the links posted. Anyway, what's up? My name is James Cool. I'm the owner of PaydiRtDFS.com and also resident bald guy. But important note here: usually Pablo wears a hat. He's not wearing a hat today because he feels really good about his hair. He feels handsome.
Great.
So I had to wear a hat today. Not something I usually do. So we're switching it up a little bit today. We're hitting week 7 for Slate Talk for NFL. This week looks better than basically any week outside of week 2. I think week 2 is the last week that I was just like, yeah, this is good. The last couple weeks have been brutal, but week 7 looks pretty good. So we're going to be talking about leverage. We're going to be talking about value. We're going to be talking about all the different game circumstances that are really important to know for this slate. If you have not joined this talk before and not paid attention to this one specifically, we don't usually hit on everything for a slate. We just hit on the spots that are really valuable and that are going to kind of determine outcomes. So with all of that said, how are you doing today, Pablo?
I am good, man. I'm been enjoying the NHL streets, confusing CKK and Kiki, thinking that the wrong person wrote the write-ups, thanking the wrong person. Spent some time on my boat today, and like you said, I'm very happy to have a slate that I think rewards good players. I mean, it doesn't mean obviously we're going to win. It's still DFS. We need a lot of things to go your way to win, but I do think slates like this that are better priced without as many smash value plays reward better construction and better game theory. So I'm excited to talk through it with you, and I think it's a fun slate to kind of break down from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's as I was looking through the projections and as I was looking through ownership, we were talking a little bit before we went live. We were talking about off, and there are some values that look like legit good values, but I think that a lot of it is also looking a bit forced. I think that there are a couple things here that I'm just looking through the projections on my other monitor here, but Rashee Rice is kind of going to be the main linchpin of the slate. How he goes will be how, a lot of MME players' portfolios and a lot of good players' portfolios will go. And then another one that I think is probably going to be really important based on how you want to look at it is Chris Moore. Chris Moore, shout out to JQ King shipping, I don't know, 100K or something like that, 6 figures something. With Chris Moore at 1% ownership, basically min price on that last 2-gamer. So with Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel out, Chris Moore is going to be, one, he's going to project well, but he's also probably going to be overowned. People are going to inflate the matchup here against Dallas. Everybody likes attacking Dallas. And people are going to be like, oh, yeah, well, Chris Moore, he paid off last week, and so he's definitely going to pay off this week. But usually when a wide receiver 4 gets blasted up into wide receiver 2 or 1 territory, it's not exactly in 1-to-1. So we'll talk a little bit about him as well. But overall, as I'm looking, we only have Rashee Rice projected for over 30% ownership. There are no there's no mid 5K values really outside of Rashee Rice. Outside of him, it's the next decent one is Kamani Vidal. And then I guess DeAndre Swift, but DeAndre Swift isn't going to get much ownership, I don't think. So not a lot of 5K values, and that's going to make it so that people make some bad decisions. So that's kind of my high level read of the slate. Pablo, have you looked at it at all?
I have, yeah. I've played around with builds. Obviously, the Deebo news dropping late today changed the slate a little bit compared to where it was yesterday with Dayton being the chalkiest quarterback. I think we should start with quarterback just because it's a natural point that a lot of people start looking where they build. And what's interesting about the slate is compared to the prior weeks we've had, especially the last 3-4 weeks, is that we have owned quarterbacks who are all over 6K. We have Mahomes, Payton Daniels, Caleb Williams, and those are going to be the most known quarterbacks. Some Dak because of the game total and the game environment people want exposure to there. And then there's a bit of a drop off. So just the field will generally, I think this is a pretty predictable sort of construction that the field will start with at the quarterback. What's interesting about those quarterbacks, and we'll get into their pairing partners here in a little bit with their wide receivers and tight ends, is that outside of Jaden, which is gonna, I think it played his ownership even a little bit more because Moore is cheap and Ertz is so cheap. Mahomes pairing partners, Mahomes is a type of quarterback you're typically double stacked, right? Like, and yes, Rashee Rice is going to be really owned, and we have him as very strong value. Like I'll just come out and say that for small field, limited entry, he's a very difficult fade. For MME, I think there's just some decisions you need to make in terms of whether you want to be at, above, or below the field, and I think a lot of that will be dictated by kind of where you want to get your leverage outside of him. But I think what's interesting about the quarterbacks is how who you pick dictates your builds. So Jaden is going to feel, I think, extra easy to click for people because Ertz and Moore are cheap. Whereas Mahomes outside of Rice, Caleb Williams for sure, with how expensive Odunze is now, and DJ Moore, who nobody really wants to play. And then even Dak with CD and Pickens and Ferb are my camera went away. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know when my camera's gone, but I'll try to fix it when I'm done talking.
That's all right.
The point I'm making is just that like the pairing partners for these quarterbacks aren't that easy. So I think what's going to happen outside of Jaden Daniels is that it's going to be pretty balanced builds. Like it's going to force like a lot of value in Chris Moore and Paydirt Ertz because those are like the only two sub 4K ish value plays in Slate that project really well. And it's going to make people a little antsy to do more, more of the stars and scrubs builds that we've been doing the last few weeks. It's going to be more balanced builds. And I think it's going to inflate Jaden a little bit more, especially in smaller field, because it makes it so much easier to play him when you can play Moore and Ertz with him. I think it's worth pointing out that Jaden Daniels runs a lot. And so Jaden Daniels is the type of quarterback that, quite frankly, I think you could play naked, or I think you could skinny him with Moore, or you could skinny him with Ertz. I don't think you need to double stack Jaden Daniels. And I also don't think you necessarily need to play Chris Moore even. I mean, I know he's like the only cheap player who projects well on the slate, but you don't have to play him, especially at his ownership. I think he's probably a little bit more fragile than people want to admit. And there's recency bias that's going to force a lot of people to play him with Daniels from last week.
Yeah.
I'll just point out is that our sheets really, really like Jacoby Brissett as a pay down. And like if you look at his range of outcomes, like he's like a standout play. And then the other thing I'll point out from our range of outcomes is that Drake May looks like a really good pivot in that mid-range pay up kind of price range, where we have a really nice range of outcomes, very similar to Mahomes and Jaden Daniels, but at a fraction of their ownership. So, and lastly, I'll just say that I think we have him as an okay projection, like nowhere near Jacoby Brissett. But I think like if you want to build totally differently than the field and just not pay up at quarterback instead of playing Brissett, I think Spencer Rattler is really interesting this week. It's more of a larger field play, but it stems. We'll get into the receivers, but it stems a lot from Olave and Rashid Shaheed projecting really well.
Yeah, I think that your point on Jaden Daniels likely getting outsized ownership, even past what we have him projected, I think that makes sense. People are naturally that they're going to be playing Chris Moore, they're going to be playing Zach Ertz. I don't think that people necessarily feel that they need to stack Jaden Daniels with them. I think that more people will play Chris Moore as a one-off and Zach Ertz as a one-off than people who play a stack of Jaden Daniels with Moore with Ertz. But I mean, if Chris Moore ends up being 15% owned. And Zach Ertz ends up being 10% owned, and Jaden Daniels ends up being 20% owned. I think that what you probably see is somewhere around 30% of the field having exposure to that group, either as one-offs or as stacks, right? 30 to 35% of the field. And that probably sounds about right. In small field, in the 333 and the 1500, and the larger buy-in contests, I think that we probably see Jaden Daniels somewhere around the 25 to 30% ownership range, and I think that's probably about right. He should be in that range. So I think that it probably is a little bit of an easy button this week to just say fuck it and just go with Jaden Daniels, with Chris Moore, or with Zach Ertz. I do not think you need to double them. But the one, Jaden Daniels at 6,900, that's still too cheap. We've talked a lot. Like this is the first time in a couple of weeks we have not started off this show saying that the pricing is just giga fucked, right? The pricing is better this week. There's like a $500 discount on nearly everyone rather than $1,000. But Jaden Daniels, he should be the most expensive quarterback on this slate. It's really not. It shouldn't be close. And the fact that he's not, he's just going to probably come in a little bit under-owned in most contests. And I think you can play him alone. My main thing is always, when it comes to a single quarterback and then a whole bunch of his pieces, if 30% of the field is going to be exposed to Jaden Daniels and or Chris Moore and or Zach Ertz, then I have a lot of interest in Ja'Cory Merritt Krosky, whatever the fuck his name is.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a lot of
But it's actually a really good. I want to let you finish quarterback point, but it's a really good segue to like a central theme, I think, on this slate, which is it's very similar to Showdown, which is what are you seeing happens when you play certain players by not playing other players, right? So if you're not playing Jaden, what are you seeing is going to happen in that game? And that game is so critical from a game environment standpoint, just because it has such a crazy total. And it's fair. I mean, the Cowboys games have shot out for the most part. I don't think it's games with these totals usually get close. I mean, they usually do something. It's very unlikely it's gonna there's gonna be 30 points in this game, right? Is it gonna go no? But I think you're gonna want something in this game.
Ropes of nothing. These two stupid fucking touchdowns last week, just mega tilting. And that wasn't even like the Cowboys are a good pass defense or whatever. I don't need to tilt about that right now. I do like Spencer Rattler a lot. I do also like Caleb Williams a lot. I don't think Caleb Williams is going to get enough ownership. I've been saying it for the last couple of weeks. New Orleans is kind of the nut matchup, man. They play really fast. They are one of the fastest paced teams in the league. They also are an offense that can actually produce. They have a really, really high volume wide receiver in Chris Olave, who can, get you there on volume and on upside. They have Rashid Shaheed. New Orleans is a really good stack, and even teams going up against New Orleans, because New Orleans plays so fast, they get a bump in production simply because of being in a high-paced game environment. And Chicago also is another team that likes to play fast. Ben Johnson will usually, in his scripted plays, make it go pretty quick. And then after that, Caleb Williams has to play superhero, and I think that him playing superhero against New Orleans, I think that's a matchup that he can win. So I do really, really like the Spencer Rattler call, and he is under 5K. It's probably a little bit more valuable this week that he's under 5K in relation to last week or 2 weeks ago, right? The pricing has been so fucked up for the last three slates.
Yeah.
Really cheap quarterbacks haven't been as valuable.
It's really ironic. It's really ironic that after having so many weeks in a row with so many fucking cheap quarterbacks, this week playing the cheap quarterback feels a contrarian approach, right? Like if you just play Rattler or you play Jacoby instead of any one of the pay up quarterbacks, you auto differentiate your lineup because you're getting 2.5K savings, like we've talked about. But this week it's like, oh wait, nobody's doing that. And I get why nobody's doing it. I mean, Jacoby's not exciting to play in that game. They don't have a very good total, and Green Bay is kind of respectable on defense, right? But Rattler has a good matchup against Chicago. And now I'll just tell you the only caution I have on that game, besides the fact that like Rattler's not a great quarterback, but that's priced in. That part it doesn't bother me. Is there is some weather concern there, and I don't really care that much about weather, but when you have winds over like 20 to 30 miles an hour, the rain's supposed to die before the game, so I'm not that worried about that. But winds of like 25, 30 plus is where it's, like, historically smart people say passing game will start to suffer for DFS purposes. So it's just a word of caution. And I also don't think it's unreasonable to play Jaden. Just be smart about it. And I also think, the other thing I'll just say about the payups besides Jaden is that Mahomes, no one, you don't want to skinny stack Mahomes. He's a pocket passer. He does run a little bit, but James Worthy, whatever the fuck Worthy's first name is, Xavier Worthy. James Worthy is a fucking, 130 years old now. Xavier Worthy is really expensive. So like Mahomes doubles I don't think going to be I think it's going to keep Mahomes slightly more in check than you would expect. And so, because again, like Jaden is just so much easier to pair when we don't have super value. And like the super value just happens to be on Jaden Daniels' team with Debo out, right? And to your point, I think similarly, Caleb is going to come in under own because of that. None of these things are going to be not owned, but I think they're going to be less owned than they otherwise would be because of how cheap Jaden's pairing partners are.
Yeah.
And so it's let's talk about running that for a second because that's funny. He must be joking. If he's not joking, it's really, really funny.
It is really funny.
It's like the only thing my DFS like got infinitely better about 3 years ago when I quit NBA DFS. It's like I'm not doing this anymore.
Last year was so fucking nice for me when I didn't play NBA. That felt great. I'm gonna run it back. I'm not gonna play NBA this year. I'm fucking running it back.
So let's talk about a couple of things in running back. So the first thing I want to talk about is that we have a few plays that are really interesting leverage off of the other part of that game. So the ones I would point out are Javonte, because everyone wants to play CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is like by far the chalkiest payout skill play this week. So I'm not saying Javonte and CeeDee can't get there in that game because it has such a high total. They could. And I actually think that's one way to approach that game is kind of you game stack it as opposed to just playing like a mini with Jaden Ertz or Jaden Moore and then Lamb run back, because by far that's going to be the most common way to approach that game. I think it's fine to play Javonte and CeeDee, but I also think you could just play Javonte and say, you know what, like hopefully that keeps CeeDee in check enough, and Javonte. We have a really good projection of Javonte, a really good projection on it. The other one is JCF in the same game. If you don't play Daniels, look at the projection we have on JCM. That's like another way to say, you know what, like not only is JCM probably stealing some of the rushing upside from Jaden, he's potentially stealing a touchdown from Zach Ertz, right? So I think both those plays are really interesting ways to flip the game assumption, and I think you can use either player as a way of getting leverage off of the passing games. The other thing I'll just point out is that Taylor, Achane, and Jacobs, all three of those guys have higher medians and higher ceilings than CeeDee Lamb. Mm-hmm. So one way to get different on this slate is to pay up, to find the money to pay up for Taylor, Achane, or Jacobs instead of CeeDee Lamb. And they have really strong projections. They're in good game environments. The only fucking annoying thing, because Jacobs is cheap enough with his ceiling and his median, that is a really nice play, is like, and this is going to lower his ownership a ton, but Schefter tweeted out like 30 minutes ago that he's a true game time decision. We really aren't going to know, maybe even after the 1 p.m. game's locked. So that's going to be like cool for people who like the late swap and will lower his ownership if you get him, but it's going to suck for single entry 3.5 players who like don't really want to build with that built in. And then before I get your thoughts on running back, the other thing I'll point out is that because Judkins, Javonte are going to need some ownership, and because people are really focused on also Breece Hall, who projects really well, and JCM to some degree, there's a couple guys here who are really slipping through the cracks. And the guy who I think is really slipping through the cracks, and we have like an okay projection on him, but it's one of the games that the team has a good total and just nobody's going to get to it because it's like the 5th or 6th highest total and not the top 3 or 4, is Dobbins. Dobbins on Denver is back from injury. Denver are heavy favorites against the Giants, and I think he's a really interesting play this week. I'll just say that. So anyway, I want your thoughts on the running backs. I would just point out that we have a lot of really good running backs, and I think that the expensive ones are going to be a little bit under-owned because people are going to pay up at quarterback and at CeeDee Lamb. It's going to make it hard to get up to the pay up running backs.
Yeah. So first, let me break things here. I've got a question for Pickens, Adunze, Saquon, Jonty, pick 2. So cut Pickens right away. CeeDee Lamb coming back, too risky with that group. I would probably say Adunze, Saquon. The Chiefs defense is pretty strong, and 2, they should control the time of possession pretty well against Las Vegas. I don't expect Las Vegas to put up too much of a fight. So probably Adunze, Saquon there. I assume you agree with me on that one, Pablo.
I do. I don't hate Pickens, but I think because of his price, like he can't be a priority outside of like a game stat. He's just too expensive with Lamb back to be a priority outside of the game stat.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So when I look at the running backs, first off, Jonathan Taylor's finally priced appropriately. And that's great and all, but there are still a lot of guys that are not priced appropriately. But I would say, as I am looking at pricing this week, pricing is much more appropriate at running back in comparison to where it has been this season. The players that I would probably say are like the most underpriced, and some of them are risky, right? DeAndre Swift at 5,700, I think, is a really good value. J.K. Dobbins, as you had mentioned, has looked really good for Denver, and it's not like we're worried about the New York Giants' run defense. And Kamani Vidal. The risk with Kamani Vidal is that we don't know that he is going to be like the guy. The Chargers
He was last week.
Yeah, he was. He was last week, but then we also saw what happened with the Cardinals, where it's like, all right, whoever the fuck it was.
Bam Knight. It's like Bam Knight has one good drive, and then he takes over.
Yeah. So I don't, we just don't know what to do with situations like that. Running back by committee is usually difficult, but the pricing is really good this week. So I think that it's definitely going to jam people onto Quinshon Judkins, who's been really good for Cleveland. He should probably be the highest owned running back on the slate. We haven't projected 25% ownership. I think that's probably about right. But I don't think that this is going to be a week where we see him balloon into the 35 to 40% range. There's just too many other options, and there are not enough like significant values at wide receiver and tight end to make it so that you can pay up at running back. So I think he's probably going to be in that 25% range. The running backs, when I see that there is no price to exploit at any position, really, when I see there's no price to exploit, you have to start exploiting ownership. So as we're looking at ownership, what do we want to exploit here, right? So Quinshon Judkins at 25% owned. How can we exploit that? We could stack Cleveland, right? Dylan Gabriel seems like he sucks, but like you could stack Cleveland and get some major leverage on him. Also, stacking Cleveland, they're free, right? Dylan Gabriel, I think, is 4,400. He's the cheapest quarterback on the slate, so that's not the worst idea. Javonte Williams, 22% owned. The hard part with Javonte Williams is that if you want to leverage him, you're just stacking the chalk, which is Dallas, right? It's kind of one or the other, right? So I don't really see, with a situation like that, I don't really see that there's much leverage to be had. So it's like, if you want to play Javonte Williams, that's fine. If you don't, then that's fine too. But you're not going to stack Dallas to get leverage on it. Jonathan Taylor at 19% owned. I think that's about right. The obvious leverage is the thing that I've done 3 fucking weeks in a row and stacked Indianapolis and got my shit kicked in because Jonathan Taylor.
But given his median and his ceiling, right? Like he's actually, because he's appropriately priced and because it's hard to get to him because everybody wants to play the favorite quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I still think I think Jonathan Taylor's like a really interesting play this week. I think like leverage. I think one of the things I've come to understand with DFS is that sometimes a guy who's owned can still be positive leverage because he should be even more owned, right? And like Jonathan Taylor, given his results so far and given his slate breaking upside, like he's being held in check because it's just really hard to fit this week. And I don't disagree that 70% is probably an efficient ownership on him, but he's one of the only players in DFS right now this week, especially at his price, who can completely break the slate. And you can get him at a relatively, at a price that's like ownership that won't be crazy, right? So anyway, keep going. But you were talking about exploiting ownership inefficiencies.
Yeah. Jonathan Taylor, he should probably be a bit higher, but at 9K, he's priced effectively, right? I do want to expand really quick on the Indianapolis thing because I'm gonna say this here and I'm gonna fucking victory lap it when it happens. Indianapolis is a wagon, dude. They are a good offense. And the only reason why Daniel Jones has not had more absolute nuke performances is because they keep blowing teams out of the goddamn water. Like they haven't needed that offense to be as good as it can be. So they're just like, oh yeah, just fucking run Jonathan Taylor 9 times within the 20 and it'll be fine. But as soon as they have a good game, as soon as their opponent can push them, we're going to have like a Daniel Jones 35, Michael Pittman Jr. 30, Tyler Warren 26 fantasy point game, and it's gonna take down the Millie Maker. I know it's gonna happen, and the thing is that it's gonna be those 3, and then on the other side, because the game where this happens, it's gonna be like 35-30 or something like that, right? Like it's gonna be a 60 plus point game.
They need to be pushed.
This game against the Chargers, it could happen. The Chargers have this pass rate over expected in the league this year per like everyone's fucking metrics, right? They love to pass. They have their wide receiver core is healthy. They still have Ladd McConkey. They have Quinton Johnson, right? Like they're a good team. This could be the week.
Yeah,
I will go down swinging with these.
So that's one of the things I think is interesting that you're talking about is that it's thinking about how to exploit certain game environments that are going to be under-owned that could turn into shootouts. Because Dallas, well, we all agree that Dallas has a very high total and certainly has a lot of value. It's also going to be very owned. So something you can sometimes do is you say, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to hope that everybody in that game does it okay, or JCM does great and Jaden doesn't and Zach Ertz doesn't. And or maybe just mini JCM with like Lamb if you want to get 2 pieces in that game, right? And what you do instead is you say, which of these games do I think can shoot out? And you build a game stack with Chicago. I think there's 2 games you can do this with. I think it's Chicago, New Orleans is one game you can do it with, and you can do it with either side there. Like cheap Rattler, which auto differentiates you in terms of macro game construction, or you can play Caleb. And I also think you can do it with the Chargers Colts game. You can play just a little piece of Washington Dallas, and you can fucking game stack Indianapolis or Chargers the whole game. And I think that just especially for a larger field, I don't think it's, I don't know. I'm not saying it's not valuable in small field, but it may be riskier than what you need to do for small field. But for larger field, for like Emmett, for the Millie Maker, and I'm sure sharp people like you do this all the time. You ask yourself, which of these games has the potential to really blow up at a much lower ownership? And I think it's basically those 2 games. It's basically the Chargers Colts game and it's the Bears Saints game. Those are the two games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that game, that Indianapolis Chargers game, I think that what I'm going to do, I'm gonna throw away a lot of money tomorrow. I'm gonna throw away a couple $1,000s. I think that it would be fun to just lock that game in MME as a stack and just say, fucking give me combos. Just give me 100 combos of that game with Daniel fucking Danny Dimes, and just hope that it hits.
You can do Herbert too, though. You can do Herbert doubles with Taylor Warren too.
Yeah, but I got to go down with the ship that I've been on for 3 weeks. If I'm going to punt away some money, I'm going to do it like a true fucking degenerate. I'm going to hit a couple questions here because we did get a couple of our fair. First off, Ed Mass was saying that he was going to compare Dobbins to Judkins. I think that's fair. The Judkins usage has been better, but I think that the Broncos offense is a bit better. I think the Bo Nix sucks, but other than that, problem with Gabriel is I'd much rather play Rattler. I do like Fan and Judkins. Can I play those guys with Rattler stack with Kamara Shaheed and then just jam and chalk? I would say you don't even have to get as different as doing it with Kamara Shaheed. Like you can just do it with Olave Shaheed.
You can just do Olave Shaheed. No one's going to play Shaheed, by the way. Shaheed is unknown.
Yeah, nobody's going to play Shaheed. I mean, I don't even think that people will play Olave, but they're not going to play him with Rattler. Like you're going to get Rattler and Shaheed at 5% combined.
People are going to play the way people are going to play that game is mostly just it's going to be Olave opposite Odunze or Olave across Swift. That's it.
Right.
Like
or
for some like for the people who play Caleb doubles, it'll be a Caleb double with Olave. But no one's playing Shaheed Olave. No.
Yeah. Wentz doubles. We haven't really talked about Minnesota. I think that game could be good. Philadelphia, for some reason, has been super pass heavy the last couple weeks. Like the people who even commented on it, they're like they just completely abandoned Saquon and the ground game for some reason. I think Saquon's hurt, like hurt.
Yeah, he doesn't look right.
Yeah,
I'm a little scared. I'm a little like. I mean, the total in that game like is not bad. Like 43.5 is not bad, but just because we have so much goodness in the Colts Chargers game, the Saints game, and then you can also play Mahomes and just don't even bring anyone back from Las Vegas if you don't want to, and then you still have Green Bay Arizona above that. Like that game, it makes me a little bit nervous, and I'm not saying it's like terrible or crazy. It feels like a very rough to watch game. I think the most interesting play from that game, and we're gonna get the receiver next, is David by far. Like
I just think that Philadelphia is too expensive.
Yeah,
they're just too expensive. I'm fine with it. Wentz doubles make more sense, I guess, but there's downside. There's more downside, I think, in that game than there are in the other game stack spots that we have talked about. And you don't even like if Carson Wentz was 4,500 or 5K, I'd be more open to it, I guess. But if you like the Minnesota environment, just play Justin Jefferson. Because he's not going to be super highly owned either, as people are just jamming in CD Lamb. I mean, I guess I haven't looked at wide receivers yet, but I don't think
we're gonna do the receiver next. But one last question, and the industry is pretty high. And the one guy I think we could see go up a little more than we expect, because he's a comfy click from a projection standpoint. Our models think he's a really good projection. He's been getting more usage. The Jets finally get a decent matchup in Carolina. It's at home. I don't know. I think I'm fine with it. Like I don't feel strongly one way or the other. Yeah. You could see our projection. I mean, it's pretty fucking strong. And the whole industry is, for what it's worth. But that's because I feel like we mentioned the interesting thing at running back we mentioned, which is Taylor as a pay up. Jacobs I love, but the fact is a game time decision makes it really difficult. Javonte we talked about JCM, we talked about Judkins, we talked about Swift a little bit, we talked about Dobbins being kind of sneaky. I just think it's worth pointing out that Breece Hall projects really well. I do think he's going to be a little more owned than what we have. When you refresh later tonight or tomorrow morning, I predict you'll have I think you'll have him in the high teens or even.
Yeah, Breece Hall, people are low on him in the industry. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, the Carolina run defense is really good, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, yeah, but Breece Hall is fucking good. But speaking of the Breece Hall thing, it's like I think that's another spot where, similar to what you can do with Quinshon Judkins, you can just stack the Jets. You can. I think that Justin Fields is probably as low as you are ever going to get him in ownership. I think you'll get him this week. So I think that's another spot. Like that's just kind of the overall thing for running backs this week. I think that it's less about the value that you get on them and more about, okay, what are the running backs that like I just can't find good leverage on? And I think that those would probably be the ones that I would feel the most comfortable playing. So of those guys, like I'm most comfortable playing Javonte and JCM, just because you're not getting any value and you're not getting any leverage by fading them and stacking their teams. So I'm more inclined to like those guys. Whereas there's a lot of other guys here where it's like, Quinshon Judkins, I think you can get massive leverage stacking Cleveland. So really quick, people calling me out on saying Wentz is 5K. What I had meant to say was it's not like he's 4,500, he's 5K. I know that I said it's not like he's 4,500 or 5K. That's my bad. For those who tune in frequently, fuck you. I'm terrible at saying. I'm a walking typo. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to wide receivers
let's talk about wide receiver. Let's talk about wide receiver. There's a couple interesting things here. Number one, we talked about Rashee Rice. I mean, look at our range of outcomes. It's fucking dumb, right? And that's why he's going to be so chalky, because like it's his first game back from suspension. It's a really high total. Like it would take. Look, it's football, and he's a receiver. Crazy shit happens, but like that's a very difficult projection to fade on a slate where we don't have that much value, right? So that's why I think for small field limited entry, he's a very challenging fade. What I think is interesting here is that we have CD as pretty heavy chalk. I know we have Jefferson like pretty owned, but I don't. I would be surprised. Like I think that everybody wants to play that Washington game, and CD is going to be by far, I think, the highest payout player on the slate.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've talked about like two ways you can get different with payups, and I think two ways you can get different with payups. Number one is you play one of the payup running backs instead of CD. You play Jonathan Taylor or Jacobs. We get clarity on maybe him or A-Chain, although it's hard to play A-Chain right now with Miami being such an absolute fire. J-Jeff is like the other guy here who's like he's kind of uncomfortable, right? Because like Lance, like the Eagles are respectable on defense. Like, it feels not, but isn't it kind of similar to Jamar Chase in the Thursday night game with Flacco? Like, I mean, nobody thinks Flacco is good, but Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase, right? Like, I don't know. Can't you say the same thing about J-Jeff or Wentz?
Yeah, you can. I mean, I'm going to echo your point. Justin Jefferson at 7,600 and CeeDee Lamb at 7,500. And then also, remember, we don't have that many values at running back. So there are going to be a lot of people that play Josh Jacobs. There are going to be a lot of people who end up, 8,800 for Jonathan Taylor. There's just not that much value. And people are going to click CeeDee Lamb before they click Justin Jefferson. So I think that our projection on Justin Jefferson of 16%, I'm going to take the under on that come tomorrow. I think he's probably going to be more in the 10 to 12% range. And like, look, that's still going to be one of the top 10, probably top 15 highest owned wide receivers on the slate. But he's not, I just don't think he's going to be like that highly owned. You can even test this out, right? Like over at Paydirt, you can go into the hand builder and you can build out basically what's going to be the chalk, right? So we can sort this by ownership. We think it's going to be Rashee Rice, right? We're going to have CeeDee Lamb. We're going to have Quinshon Judkins, Jaden Daniels. We're going to find probably going to be Chris Moore, right? Who else is probably going to be highly owned here? I mean, I guess, yeah, Javonte Williams.
Yeah, Ertz.
Yeah, so like if you stack that out, you just like we have 5,200 per player.
And then the Cleveland defense, it'll be like everyone's going to do that Judkins because they're only like $3,000.
Well, they're going to do
Browns defense with Judkins.
Actually, so that gives you 7,500. That's literally just going to land straight on the head of Justin Jefferson.
Yep, instead of CeeDee Lamb. Right?
No, I mean, you can basically get this, right? Like we're 100 over. You get off the Browns. Okay, here's your cash game lineup tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm gonna give you two more reasons to love Justin Jefferson. And I'm like kind of talking myself into it because I wasn't gonna do it before we talk. I'm gonna give you two more reasons to love him. I know you already love him, but I'm gonna give you two more reasons besides our projections and besides the fact that I agree with you. I think he's gonna be way less owned than what we have him at right now. Number one, I'm looking back at his pricing from last year. 8,500, 8,800, 8,700, 8,800, 8,600, 8,100, 8,200, 8,300, 8,400. He's never been this low. Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, ready for the other part? The last 2 weeks, Cleveland Browns, everybody agrees, very good defense, right? 7,300, 11 targets, 123 yards, no touchdown, right? Because he gets a touchdown there, he's not priced the way he is this week.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh Steelers the week before, 7,500, 11 targets, 10 receptions, 126 yards. So like his production has been fucking amazing in matchups that are just as bad. Like the Steelers and the Browns defense is in no way secondary wise any worse, if not way better than the Eagles one. So and he's been it's the result of like this is where you can exploit certain plays because of lineup construction and pricing. Like because again, people want to play the pair quarterbacks, and because CeeDee Lamb's in that game with Jaden Daniels, and even if you don't play Jaden Daniels, like people are still going to want to play mini correlations in that game with Lamb and Ertz or Lamb and Moore or Lamb and JCM. It's really, I do honestly believe it's going to suppress Jefferson, and I think he's a really nice upside play. At I think naturally suppressed ownership.
Yep. Yeah. After building out that cash lineup, I do think he's probably going to be about 15% owned. Just like he's more accessible than I thought that he was after like, and remember, anybody who fucking comes to me for this is my first time looking at the slate. This is my process. We talk through things and I don't look at the slate before this. So yeah, I think he's going to be a little bit more accessible. But it kind of depends on how the roster construction goes. I do think that probably in that 15, 16, 17% range, that makes sense. Top 10 in terms of wide receiver ownership. But the argument is that he should probably be a bit higher than that, right? He should probably still be in the 25 to 30% range, similar to CeeDee Lamb, who is probably going to be, 35, 40% owned tomorrow. So, I outside of Rashee Rice and CeeDee Lamb, ownership's relatively flat as of now. I think we should expect Chris Moore to be a little bit higher tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I think that people are probably going to say, oh, well, Rashee Rice is super highly owned, but nobody's playing Xavier Worthy. And then some Rashee Rice is going to come down and some Xavier Worthy is going to come up. I think Xavier Worthy probably ends up in the 15% range. I think we probably see some Jalen Lane move up a little bit more. People are just they're just gonna jam this Washington Dallas game. I think that's fine. But overall, like we had mentioned, Chris Olave at 8% ownership, that's a fucking good play. Like the dude has massive volume this year. That's a good play. Stephon Diggs, for no fucking reason last week, was like 20% owned. And this week, in a better matchup, at the same price, he's going to be 8% owned. Those are the kind of things that I love to see in DFS because, like, I wasn't super high on him last week, the same price. I'm not super high on him this week, but everyone else probably should be, especially considering we just don't have that many strong values in the 5K range. So he should be higher owned, but he's not going to be.
He had a Q tag, and that might be, I don't know. I haven't seen an update on his injury, but that might have been like keeping people a little bit scared.
No, it's just because of the roster construction, right? It's just because people are mostly saying like, okay, at wide receiver, we need to jam CeeDee Lamb and Chris Moore. And then, at that third wide receiver position, they're either going to be paying up or they're going to be paying into kind of this mid-range, right? Like, and people would much rather play AJ Brown, Ladd McConkey, Quinton Johnson, Xavier Worthy, Cortland Sutton, apparently. Like, there's just so many guys above him in that price range that
I think one of the things that I think is interesting about this slate is that while like Ladd and Odunze and Xavier Worthy aren't low, I think because we don't have as much like smash value this week, like doubles with those guys is not going to be as common. I don't think Mahomes, Worthy, Rice doubles are going to be as common as people think they will be. I think it's going to be much more common for let's play Rice as a one-off or Rice across from Mayer, who we'll get to in a minute, the tight end. Because one of the things I found myself, this is something I've come to realize that when I get kind of like uncomfortable building a lineup, that's usually signal to me that that's like sometimes a good line, because it means that it's harder to do that. And I was like, can I build doubles with Caleb? And I was like, well, who the fuck am I using besides Odunze? Like there's okay, can I build doubles with Mahomes? I'm like, well, yeah, maybe, but like now I'm meeting Xavier Worthy at his price, and I'm giving up like a good amount of median in net. So it forces you down a little bit at either tight end or running back, where you can't live in that balanced build that everybody wants to go to, that feels so much less fragile, right? So I think getting a little uncomfortable and pushing your like double slightly more expensive receiver exposure this week is like a sneaky way to build upside that I don't think is going to be as common with lineups, because people are going to play like an expensive receiver like Lamb, maybe some JJF, but like getting up to like Pickens and Lamb or Worthy and Rice, or like QJ and McConkey. Like, I don't think those things are going to be low owned, because all those guys are kind of owned. But I think in combination, they're not going to be nearly as owned as playing them as one-offs or as mini correlations.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that there's going to be a lot of people who are playing a lot of one-offs, and that's a consequence of higher pricing and having less values. People just they prefer to do the lottos, and that is where I've been on this train this year of saying that correlation is less valuable in DFS, and it has been way less valuable in DFS. But that has coincided with pricing being a lot looser, where you really shouldn't be chasing correlation. This week, I think you should chase correlation. Like I said, I think you should chase game stacks. I think you should chase onslaughts this week, because there's just not that many values. The place where people are going to chase game stacks and onslaughts is Washington, Dallas.
Right. Point blank. No one's going to do it in the other games.
Yeah, no, nobody's going to do a full, I mean, outside of us, and we're going to make a lot of money from it, nobody's going to do a full Chargers Colts stack, right? Like, people aren't looking to the chat's point. Nobody's really looking at Minnesota, Philadelphia game stacks, because it's expensive. Like, in order to do that, you're going to have to sacrifice at running back. People just don't want to do that this week. So I think that this week, this is the week where we should lean into correlation. This is where the week where we should lean into game stacking a bit more than we have in the past. And, that makes me feel a little warm and fuzzy inside, because that's the way that NFL DFS
it used to be, and that was when it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun before fucking DK broke their algo and it became NBA.
Bro, did you see my lineup that I posted last week? It was gorgeous. It did not deserve to cash by literally less than a point. It was gorgeous, but because of the fucked up pricing algorithm, it didn't do much. Anyway, it's
questions before we get to tight end.
Yeah, if anybody's got questions on wide receivers, throw them in really quick before we go on to tight end. I'm going to riff for a second on what we're looking at. Usually what I also want to do lately is look at expected fantasy points, which is the expected fantasy points for players on their season long totals compared to like their median. So Ladd McConkey, his expected fantasy points is higher than what his median projection is. That's a pretty good spot, I think. We have Jordan Addison, his expected fantasy points is a bit higher as well. We have guys like Quinton Johnson, who his median projection is higher than his expected fantasy points has been on the season. So that's a half red flag. You can see it with Ted McMillan as well. We have some large ones, right? Jalen Waddle, his expected fantasy points is way lower than his projection. Roma Dunze, way lower. Like Roma Dunze has been way outpacing his expected fantasy points, mostly because he has been getting these like deep ball shots and not that much red zone influence. So, situations like that I think are worth exploiting. Trey Tucker is lower. That makes sense. Adam Thielen's a funny one. His expected is 9.81. He's projected for 1. I think that's just a change in the way that stuff has been working through and the market shares. But all right, let's see. We got a couple. Value QB naked or skinny, then double stack, bring back elsewhere the way to go. So I think that you can do that. I don't think that that's a bad idea with somebody like a Rattler or a even a Dylan Gabriel at 4,400, because there's not that many values on this slate. I think that that's not the worst idea. But
you can play Rattler or Olave if you want, but if you're going to do that with Rattler, this is one example. Why not just fucking throw Shaheed in there?
Right. So the other thing is if it's a week where there is a lot of value and you are expecting to lean less on correlation as it is, that's when the value naked quarterbacks make more sense, right? Like that's kind of why we've been beating that drum for the last 3 or 4 weeks. This week, if you expect correlation to matter more, you have to maximize it with your quarterback, right? Like if I'm going to overstack Indianapolis and LA, if I'm going to game stack Colts Chargers, I expect points to be scored in that game in bunches. And if that happens, then there's not enough of an incentive for me to get off of Daniel Jones or Justin Herbert to save myself some value, especially if the prices are accessible at the stack that I want to use. It would be one thing if you're trying to do like Philadelphia, Minnesota, and you needed the value underneath, somebody. But even at that, right, you have Carson Wentz, so you don't need to do it. I think this week is kind of one of the worst weeks to do that, mostly just because we are leaning on game stack and correlation. Hollywood and Kelsey without Mahomes, but go Dak and Lamb, Dobbins with Denver. Def saves a lot of money.
Stupid contrarian. It's a stupid contrarian.
It's look, if you want to do that, do it in the Millie Maker. Pablo and I, we think more toward, we first think towards small field and single entry stuff, and I would never do that in that, just because like it's so volatile. But in the Millie Maker, like if what you want to do is get away, it like what I would say. If you want to play Hollywood and Kelsey without Mahomes and fade Rashee Rice, you'd better fucking go full chalk around that. Like, just optimize for chalk around that if you want to do that, because that's so much leverage already. You just don't need anything more on top.
You could also play like Pacheco instead.
You could play Pacheco. Yeah. Which wide receiver is going to be under owned in the 5K, 6K range?
I'll give you one that you already talked about.
Who we got? Stephon Diggs, Stephon Diggs is going to be under.
I'll give you another one, Keenan Allen.
Yeah, Keenan Allen. Chris Olave at 9%, that's too low. Stephon Diggs, 7%, that's too low. Jacoby Myers, if he plays, that would be too low at 5,500, but he does have a questionable tag. So
Dobbs isn't terrible at 5K.
Yeah, Keenan Allen. I mean, Lad McConkey at 6K, I think is a really good play too. There's a lot of under-owned plays. The thing is, none of them are like smash plays. Michael Pittman at 12% is fucking criminal. I think that's a terrific play.
Yeah, I think Pittman. Like I will say this about that Colts game. Like, even if you don't want to go full balls to the wall, James McCool game stack, I still think you want exposure to that game. And I think there's a few ways to get it, even if you don't game stack it. I think we talked about Vidal. Well, people are scared to click on Vidal because Judkins feels so easy, and so does Devontae and Breece Hall. But Vidal, if he has the role that he could have in that game, he's a really, really strong play at his price.
Yeah.
Warren will be owned, but not like he'll not be crazy, but he'll be owned. And I think that makes Pittman interesting. I think Pittman might be like the guy in that game who gets the most squeeze, because some people will find a way to get to Taylor. A lot of people will play Warren. He's the clear pay up tight end tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I don't know that like a whole lot of people are going to choose Pittman. He's definitely going to run.
Yeah, 100%. Let's see a couple more, and then move on to tight end. So Winter Fields GPP, fuck. Depends on the GPP, I guess.
I think both are larger field plays. Like, I do think that it's the thing you have with Wentz, and Fields makes up for this by being a runner, but it's really nice that Wentz has JJ. Like you can play them together, and you got a really nice. That's just really nice right off the bat. Whereas with Fields, it's like you're kind of hoping he runs a couple in.
Yeah, like where do you go with Fields even? I don't like who's their one right
the
now?
The only guy you're playing with is their tight end, the rookie Mason Taylor, who's cheap. We have a really good projection on Mason Taylor this week at the tight end. It's like a 5 tight end.
Yeah, there should be a rule in every optimizer that says if Alan Lazard is your wide receiver 1, don't play the quarterback. I'm not fucking doing that. So it has to be.
But to your point before, I mean, we'll say for very large field, is not a very large field player. Like you'll never get Fields as low, like this low. This is the lowest he'll ever be. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks he sucks. Everyone thinks the Jets suck, and they do have a good matchup against Carolina. It is. So it's enticing from that standpoint.
Yeah. But fucking Alan Lazard sucks so bad. It is like it's cheap. A Jets stack is fucking cheap. If you want to go that route, I don't hate it. But I'm gonna have to lean Wentz there just because Justin Jefferson is actually good. Okay, let's move on here to tight end, and then we can answer some questions at the end as well. Just kind of like.
So I'll just say this about tight end, which we've said in multiple discussions before. Especially this week, I often try to correlate my tight end either as part of a mini stack or with my quarterback, and I think especially this week, I think that's important because we have Tyler Warren, who's the payout. He's clearly the payout. We have Zach Ertz, who's clearly the value piece, and I think both those guys will be a little more on than what we have in mind.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's kind of like what fits in terms of what game you're playing and correlating. I do think Ferguson, similar to what I just said about Pittman in the Colts game, Ferguson's ironically, after being like the best tight end play the last few weeks, going to be one of the guys squeezed this week. Like everyone, that's a one skill player in that game who I don't think will be very on. So I think Ferguson, figuring out how to play Ferguson as part of your Washington Dallas exposure is one way to get like a piece that's like a player who's been really good for the last several weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Fannin will be a little bit on because of Njoku being injured. The bonus with Fannin is that A, he's kind of a beast, and B, he's a little bit of leverage off of Judkins. But that game has the potential to be really gross. I mean, it's going to be horrible weather, and it's two kind of shitty offenses. So I don't know. And I think he's not going to be like super low. People want some savings at tight end if they can find it. If they're not going to go Ertz, they're going to say, well, who else can I save money off of? And it's either Fannin or it's Mason Taylor. The cheap.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that Harold Fannin. I mean, right now I haven't checked for 3%. He's gonna come up. Ownership is gonna be pretty spread out. I do think Jake Ferguson is gonna come down. I think that people will probably play some Kelsey. People will play some Mason Taylor. I just think that ownership is gonna be spread out. So it's just not. You're not gonna get much. Similar to what I said with running backs. If there's no values, then we play the ownership game. With tight ends. If there's no ownership game to play, then we just kind of play the values. And that's going to be Harold Fannin Jr. and probably Mason Taylor, who has been the wide receiver 1 for the Jets. So to this point, just Skinny Fields and Taylor, yeah, sure. That's free. It's a really, really free way to do things. And it'll get you, it'll get you your upside and your correlation, and it'll get you what you want. But tight end, I think this week is very much just play the best play. Don't really worry about it. Play who correlates with your quarterback, and just move on. I will say that I think that Harold Fannin Jr. with no Njoku is probably $1,000 underpriced. He's really good.
Mayer is still a good play, by the way. Like we don't know yet about what's his face's Bowers. He's like been really gimpy. He's been fucked up all year. And Mayer's like a top tier talent, and he had a great game last week. So I don't hate him, especially as part of a bring back on a Kansas City game that where they could force. The problem with Vegas we talked about, but is just it's really fucking bad. And so there's a chance that like we don't talk a whole lot about defense, and I don't think we should. But I think one fun thing to do this week is just play Kansas City doubles with the Kansas City defense and just assume that they just like win like 35-3.
Yeah.
Which is very possible, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just say, I mean, the only other thing I'll say is I think Warren is decent pay up shot. Like we talked about that game environment being pretty nice. Ertz will suck out some ownership from Warren, where he'd have more. People didn't want that Washington game so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Warren's like the one guy, like 52 still feels pretty light on him. Like 52, I think he should be closer to 6K. I mean, yeah. I still think he's underpriced.
Yeah, I agree with that. Tyler Warren, tight ends are underpriced $1,000 basically across the board, I think. This is the one position that I still think the DraftKings is lagging on so far. The pricing is tighter this week for sure, but tight end is still lagging.
One thing you can do, one thing you can do, because I'm surprised nobody's asked, and somebody probably will on Discord either tonight or tomorrow. It's something you've done the last couple times we've done this, which is you can select running back, wide receiver, tight end, more wide receiver, tight end, because there's not that many cheap running backs. Mm-hmm. And you can drop the price to 5K or less. And what you will find, I think, is that double tight end this week is viable. Because Chris Moore is the only punt value this week. So if you're not playing Chris Moore, then who the fuck else are you going to play to save money? And it turns out it's people like Fannin and Mason Taylor and Zach Ertz. And those are all better values than the cheap wide receivers. Yeah. So I think double tight end is one way this week to get the value you need to get the pay up at running back wide receiver.
Yeah, to be clear, I did tight end, running back, wide receiver here, and there's not a single running back that shows up as like a good value. I mean, this is under 5K, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but the last few weeks we have had some running backs that cheap ones.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we move this up to 5,500, I guess let's check that.
Well, then you're gonna start to get not even
you
there.
Still get some wide receivers, but it's tight ends, man. Like tight ends, this is a good
tight end. This is a good double tight end week. I just say that. When I started building, when you're building, sometimes you're like, fuck, I can't build anything I like that much. And I was doing that because I was like, okay, I want to play Mahomes with Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice with maybe Mayer coming back, right? And I'm like, it's still not enough value because I'm already spending so much money on Xavier Worthy, who's really expensive. Like, where the fuck am I going to find value? Even the good running backs are still like 5,500 to 6,500 at minimum. And then if you want to play Lamb or JJF, like you're fucked. So, and I don't want to play Chris Moore as a one-off. Nobody should do that. I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, double tight end. That's how you do it. That's how you unlock value on. So if you find yourself building lineups with one of the pay-up quarterbacks or with two of the pay-up flex positions, like Taylor and Jefferson or Taylor and Lamb, or any of those pay-up running back wide receivers, and you can't find value this week, and you don't want to go down to Rattler or Jacoby or Wentz, then the other way to do it is go double tight end. That's how you do it this week. Yep,
I totally agree. I think the double tight end makes sense this week if we look at even $5,500 or less. Tight end, wide receiver, tight end. Like tight ends just dominate the top of the 3X right.
So before we answer final questions and answer any final questions, I just want to say one closing thought on game environments, which is what I like to do sometimes, especially for baseball, is I like to sort by Vegas totals. And I like to figure out, are there any teams or games that are going to not have as much ownership as they should, given their total? And there's two teams that to me stick out this week from that standpoint. And that is New England and Denver. They both have team totals, not game totals. The game totals are not great because their opponents have low totals, right? But they have team totals. The Patriots and the Broncos both have individual team totals that are right up there with the Chargers and the Colts and everybody else. And yet, no one's going to play Drake May. People are going to overlook Dobbins. No one's going to play Cortland Sutton. And so I would just say that I think looking at players in those two teams, the Patriots and the Broncos, is one way to kind of get exposure to teams with decent totals that just aren't going to be on.
Yep. Yeah, and when you look at that, you can do that in the Paydirt models as well. For those of you who are not subscribers, and I know there are some of you who are not subscribers because we have 357 people watching this, and I do not make that much money per month from Paydirt. So there are people who are watching and don't have a subscription. After
this Slate Talk, we should have that many subs tomorrow.
Yeah, I hope so. In the stacks range of outcomes, you can sort this by game total. Dallas obviously with the highest, Kansas City at 28.3. But then as you go down, you can see the ownership. Chicago looks under-owned for their game total, 26. Green Bay looks under-owned. And then we have this group that Pablo and we've kind of been beating the drum here of this group this entire show. This Chargers, relatively low ownership. New England, Denver, to your point, all likely going to be, less than 25% some ownership. And then Indianapolis, we have the majority of these stacks under 25% some ownership. So this is a really easy way. And when I write my article for Sunday mornings, I always highlight this stuff as well. Like I'll take a screenshot of all of these based on team total and be like, yeah, the ownership is mostly making sense, but then we have these teams that are lower owned. I think that that's a really important way to do it. There's usually magnitudes order. Well, there used to be value that you could find simply by just going with the second highest game total on a slate because there was outsized ownership on the highest game total. The industry has gotten sharper on that kind of stuff, but you can still find plenty of spots. If you just look for game totals that are 25 or higher, you're going to find spots like New England, Denver, Chargers, Green Bay, stuff like that. So I think that's a great point to bring up.
Cool. Any questions before we do, or we can do our picks? Any contrarian pick that you like before we do questions?
Yeah, no, go ahead and if you guys have any questions, go ahead and throw them in. Pablo and I will do our kind of like stands here, and then we'll answer some questions. I did see this one. I want to answer this specifically because I think that it's a pretty decent question. But if you guys have any other questions, please let us know. So Pablo, you go first as usual as I try to formulate.
Okay. I'm gonna do one I talked about already, which is, I'm probably gonna play at least one contest that's a little bigger than what I usually play, just because I think this is a slightly longer field play. Mm-hmm. But after complaining about pay down quarterbacks for so many weeks in a row, and wanting to build a little bit differently than everyone who's going to pay up at quarterback, and specifically use that Cowboys Commanders game with payups, I will have one team in the larger field contest with Spencer Rattler. I think he is just in a good game environment. I might be a little scared by the weather. It doesn't sound crazy like the Miami Cleveland game where you're going to have crazy winds. In Chicago has sort of been like a version of Dallas this year, where they have had sort of shootouts because their offense is now functional, but their defense isn't very good. So I think I really like that game. I think there's a number of ways that you can do it. I think you can play skinnies with Lave, or you can just double with Shahid, who will be unowned. I think you can play Swift on the other side of that. The Jones that we talked about, it's a little pricey now. Like he's come up to the point where his expected fantasy points are now outpacing his median projection, which is a little scary, but he's still a good play, and he's not going to be that owned. So I think Rattler is an interesting play just from the standpoint of you're getting different with the roster construction in a game that has a lot of goodness in it, and it allows you then to get up at the split positions by not having to do dumb stuff elsewhere.
Yeah, I will also go with the game environment call, and I just think that Indianapolis Chargers game is just nuts. I think that Indianapolis is an underrated offense just because it's been like all Jonathan Taylor, but when they need to actually score points, they have been able to score points in bunches this year. The Chargers are one of the pass heaviest groups in the league and have a healthy wide receiver core and a banged up running back core as well, which I think is a valuable thing when we're considering this stuff. So I just think that game environment is really, really good. I think that if I was going to also take another stand here, just sticking with the idea of macro concepts, double tight end I think is really, really good. That's such a sharp call out, Pablo, this week, just because we just don't have that many strong values at wide receiver and running back, and tight end is kind of the one position where we do have like a realistic value proposition on a lot of the players. Like you look at them and all of them are like $500 to $1,000 in price, and the ownership is not high on any of them. So not only are you getting a value discount, you're also getting an ownership discount. And I just think that that's something that we should probably try to take advantage of this week. So I think that this week is just a big macro week for me. I think that you can win without focusing a lot on the micro, without focusing a lot on the individual pieces, and instead just having really good roster construction this week. Let's see. All right. So let's see. So first, I'm going to answer this one first. What's your advice for playing single bull in the Millie Maker? So first off, my main advice of playing single bullet in the Millie Maker is expect to lose that money. Just go in thinking that you're going to lose. I mean that. But like also build the best lineup that you've ever seen in your entire life, right? And when I say that, Pablo and I have talked about this before. We never enter a lineup. We don't put money on a lineup that we don't think is just like the absolute nuts. It's why him and I have a propensity to end up being like, oh, we're going to build like 2 or 3 lineups. And all of a sudden we have fucking 7 because we get into this groove of building fucking good lineups. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I need money on all of them. So I think that there are a lot of people who like, I see comments every single week that's like, oh man, I hate my lineups. She's like, then you shouldn't fucking be playing them. Like
you should feel really, really, I mean, especially with NFL, I was thinking about that the other night with NHL and with MLB, is that we get so many contests every week. With NFL, we have like, and yes, we've got the showdowns, and yes, we have a bit of Christmas and Thanksgiving sites, but like we really only have like a handful of really good sites. And so you kind of have to think about like, it's like your chance to craft like fucking a few lineups or however many you're going to build that you really, really feel good about. And if you don't, well, that's like 8% of the year is gone. Like in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you've lost a quarter of the year, right? So, but the other point of advice I give on building one lineup, whether it's small or large field, is don't fall into that trap of like sometimes when people only play one lineup, they get overly conservative because they don't want to lose their money. And they say like, well, since this is my only lineup, I'm gonna make sure at least it in cashes, because if I lose all my money in one lineup, I'm gonna be really mad, right? And you can't think that way. Like you have to build a lineup that has the right leverage for the contest you're playing, which means that in the Millie Maker, you have to build a lineup that has a chance to win, which for a contest that big means it will almost for sure lose.
Yeah.
So do not get overly conservative. That's my advice. So get wacky in something that big, because otherwise you shouldn't even play. Just play something smaller field if you don't want to do that.
Yeah, that was going to be the point. Is that when I say that you should expect to lose it, you should build a lineup that like is probably going to lose. But if it wins, like if it has the outcome that you need, then it passes the field. That's why I'm always, especially with running back chalk. It's like I think that a Cleveland sack is perfect Millie Maker sack, just because if Quinshon Judkins is going to be 35% owned, automatically if Cleveland ends up airing it out and passing the ball 45 times and Judkins doesn't get the work that he needs, but Dylan Gabriel throws for 285 and 3, with Fannin getting 2 touchdowns and like, I don't know, fucking Jerry Jeudy or something like that, getting one of them, like automatically you've passed so much of the field, assuming that also other stacks do not just absolutely nuke, right? Like you need both sides of it. But think about like, what is the thing that, and you only have to do it with one part of your lineup. But if I have a single lineup in the Millie Maker, I'm thinking, what is the thing that is going to give me the best win equity if it happens, and then just surround it with the best plays. And the secret in the Millie Maker for people who MME is that they just do that 150 fucking times. They just, their entire portfolio is just like, each lineup is like, okay, this is the win condition, this is the win condition, this is the win condition, and then just fucking jamming the rest of the best plays. You can go look at like Hicksbro, go look at BK Reader, go look at Shady Advice, go look at all of like the best players and look through their portfolio. And it's just going to be fucking jammed with chalk. But it is every single one of them is going to, well, except for Hicksbro builds some shitty lineups. I'll say that. But like the other guys, they always have like one really, really good win condition. So my advice for single entry in a Millie Maker type contest with this huge field, just build a lineup that has a really good point of win equity that really well leverages the field, and then just don't get cute with the rest, right? It still needs to be a good lineup. You still need to build out with good, well-projected plays, but you can have, if you're fading Quinshon Judkins, stack Cleveland. If you're fading CeeDee Lamb, play Javonte Williams and stay away from Dak and see, like the things that we have talked about of like building those leverage points. That's how you build single entry for really large field. And then, if you ramp it down to a smaller field, then you get a little bit less leverage. I talk a lot about this in Theory DFS, by the way. Which shout out Theory DFS. We wrote that years ago, and
shout out Blender too. Someday maybe he'll rejoin us, Blender.
One day I'll get him back on a show. One day I'll get him back. But today's not that day. Anyway, let's move on. We'll answer a couple more questions and we'll get out of here because we've been going for a while. What do teams that don't contain Hall Judkins look like? I think I'm going to go after that Chicago-New Orleans game with Indianapolis Chargers and Jam Lamb with JCM. Yeah, I think if you're staying away from Judkins, that gives you, and this piggybacks on what I just said. If you're staying away from Judkins, I think that it gives you a lot of leeway to just stack Dallas, Washington, because it has a super high total. Like, you don't have to overthink it. If you get away from Judkins, you get 35% of the field discount. Like, you probably just go with Washington, Dallas. Hall, I don't know yet. I want to see what ownership looks like. I think Hall is going to come in under where we're at because people are just kind of low on him this week because of Carolina Panthers defense. But I would say that if you get away from Judkins, you probably should just start with Jaden Daniels and CeeDee Lamb. And this is single entry 3 max talk, right? Like in MME, there's fucking endless possibilities. But single entry 3 max, I would say you probably just start with CeeDee Lamb and Jaden Daniels, and then like other pieces of chalk, and then kind of figure out the rest because you're gonna have enough leverage. But I don't know. Other thoughts?
Let me just piggyback on one thing about that game again, because I made the point earlier, but I'm not sure I made it strongly enough, and I think it's important. Which is to say that if a game goes off, we should not be so arrogant as to think exactly we know how it goes off.
Yeah.
And James noticed this a few years. I noticed it, and then I asked him about it, and he explained to me why it was happening. Which is that I 2 or 3 years ago, I started doing a lot better in the late slate. 3 or 4 games. And the reason I was doing well is because I was game stacking, and I was game stacking with some players that nobody else was using, or not using as much, right?
Right.
So one of the things I would just say about Washington Dallas is if you think that game gets nutty, like, do not be afraid to play it in different ways. Like, play Ferguson with CeeDee, play Javonte with CeeDee, play there's just don't fall into that trap of the only way you can play it is Jaden Moore or Jaden Hurts with CeeDee, because it's like, it's a stupid thing the field does. Like they think they know exactly how it's going to go off. Right? If it goes off, these are the guys who have to go off, and it's true, but it's not. It is very true that if that game goes off, it's likely Jaden Daniels and CeeDee Lamb do well, but it's not. Do they do well or not? It's do they do well given their price and their ownership. Right. And they might do well, but not well enough given their price and their ownership, where you're not better off playing JCM. And so just don't be afraid to play those games with good totals in different ways. I just think that's like not a point that people make.
Yeah. Yep. That's really good point. Really good point. All right. Do I prefer Mason Taylor or Fannin? Probably Fannin, but I mean, you can kind of pick a choice on that.
But Mason Taylor is cheaper. But yeah, probably Fannin. But then if you're playing Fannin, you're fading Judkins probably.
Yeah, they're both just underpriced. You can play Judkins and Fannin together.
Yeah,
but they're cheap enough. I don't have a problem with that.
I'm just a little worried that game is really gross. Like that game, the weather is shit, and people feel comfortable with Judkins, but like just so you guys know, that game total is by far the lowest total. It's a 35-point total.
Yeah, that's low.
Cleveland 19, Miami 16.5. Like, there's an argument to be made that like just maybe don't play anybody in that game.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. I mean, a game total. If you were sitting here and somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, I'm going to play a 45% owned running back in a game with a game total of 35," you would laugh at them.
But Dobbins, just play fucking Dobbins for God's sake. Nobody. Yeah. That was the game the guy forgot to talk about as my second call out. Yeah. Like no one's gonna play Dobbins. Why? He's underpriced, and when the Giants is home favorites.
There's a non-zero chance that Myles Garrett actually kills Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
Like there's a non-zero chance accidentally kills him. So how many fantasy points is killing the quarterback worth? I'm sorry, that wasn't a funny joke. It's easy to build 50 lineups that are good. Not sure you can pick just 3. Okay, I can tell you that. And I'm sure Pablo can too. It's because there are certain players that you just start with in each lineup. And sure, you can build 50 lineups around like 6 players, but when your pool of players that you really want to play is only like 14 players or something like that, you're not going to make that many combinations of it. I start with you start to run into issues when you get to like 6 or 7 lineups, because at that point, like I got a fucking full send, or I need to step back from my computer and not be doing this right now. But like with 3 or 4 lineups, man, I think it's really easy to just be like, all right, well, I have a shit ton of money on 4 players, and then I just kind of sprinkled in around them, and it's fine.
Yeah. The other thing, it gets back to something you said before, which is how much action you want to have.
Yeah.
One of the things I try to do unsuccessfully is try to have some more action on my lineups. And so if you're playing like the single entry 1500, 300 entry, and you want to play 5 lineups, well, fuck. That means that you're playing like 10K, 7 to 10K in action. I don't know. Most of us aren't playing that much, right? Like unless you're a pro. So one of the hard things about playing a handful of lineups is also just like how much action you want to have. And if you do want to delve into the deeper waters with the higher stakes, at the end of the day, you just have to make decisions, right? You've said that many, many times. Like, people think that it's like the meme at this point of like 150, everyone can win with 150. It's been so played out because we all make fun of it so much. But at the end of the day, even MME players have like they're making decisions. If your exposures on how far up or below the field you are in certain plays or certain macro construction, that's a decision you're making. How are you going to try to beat the field? Like Jeremy talked about it the other day when he almost banked that showdown with. He talked about it. He said the reason he really liked Moore was because he felt like the cheap receivers had a floor and a median that was just as good as some of the expensive ones, but they were way less owned. So he built a set of portfolio lineups that exploited that. Like he had a lot more cheap receivers than anybody in the field did in his builds. And so your lineup should tell a story and they should show decision making. And it doesn't mean you're going to win. Like you might, you have to take some risks to get leverage. And so, but they should tell a story and saying like, this is what I'm banking on. If this happens, I win.
Yeah, that's exactly. All right, last question here. Chiefs or Broncos on FanDuel? We don't play on FanDuel. I'm sorry. Like I haven't looked. Uh,
I have an admission to make.
are you playing on FanDuel this week?
No, I'm not. I'm not kind of. I so I have a bunch of friends who I was in a season long, and like a few years ago they ended the season long. And I was like, oh fucking hooray, like I'm out of the season long, guys. I've been trying to get out of my season long leagues for years, right? And they're like, oh, we're doing this thing on FanDuel where it's like every week the winner of the thing, you do like $100, and every week the winner gets 50 and second place gets 25. And I'm like, and all of these guys are casual players, like none of them play daily fantasy, right? And so every fucking week on FanDuel, I play a cash lineup, and every week I win. I just play a cash lineup against like 20 dudes who don't play DFS. I win every week. And what I've started doing is I've started putting that lineup in like the single entry, like $200 or $500 contests of FanDuel. And every week I double my money on FanDuel because
you're probably like $1 million in your balance on FanDuel. Good for you.
Because I play like nothing, but it's so dumb. It's just FanDuel sucks.
You're literally shooting fish in a proverbial barrel. That's kind of mean. Kind of mean. Anyway.
This is the third year in a row. I won the last 2 years easily. Like I won like 8 of the 16 weeks or 17 weeks. And this year I've won 3 of the first 7 weeks already.
And it's so hard to get out. These guys are like, oh yeah, I mean, we're gonna go from season long. Like, oh yeah, I'm sure Pablo he plays DFS. Like, try to get him over here. And like, these guys don't even know they just invited like a literal Tyrannosaurus Rex into the fucking coop, right? Like the hen house.
No excuse for playing. I don't want to play a FanDuel, but they forced me to do
it. they're like, oh yeah, well we can't get him to play season long, so let's just get him to play DFS. Fucking come on, guys, have a brain. Have a brain. The answer to that question is mostly whichever one fits your lineup better. I think that both Chiefs and Broncos defenses are fine. Mahomes on FanDuel solo. So we talked. I'm not sure how late you tuned into this. We've been going for about an hour and a half, but I'll re-upload this on YouTube as well. You can go back. We talked a lot about how correlation and game stacking is important this week. So I'm not going to condone or give advice of playing any quarterback solo this week. I just think that it's a much higher value prop to game stack this week. And then last question here. What's thoughts on Pollard? Man, I haven't even considered Pollard. Yeah, I mean,
they have a super low total, and New England's like not bad this year. I mean, I don't know.
Look, I think it's the same thing that we've been saying with running backs, right? I think that he's low owned enough that you can take a shot on him. I don't think that there's that much value, so you just play the ownership game and you play the leverage game, and I think Pollard is probably fine up and down. Oh, good night, little bud. Love you, baby. My son is going to sleep. And that is our cue to kill this. So this has been a good one. Yeah, this has been a good one. So, clearly, if anybody wants to go back and look, I will re-upload this on YouTube and you can rewatch tonight or tomorrow morning. So that said, there are 399 of you watching right now. I do not have 399 people subscribed to Paydirt. I can tell you that with complete honesty. But you should go subscribe if you enjoyed all of this.
Show the pricing, for God's sakes. You guys,
pricing.
If you like even 10% of what we talked about tonight, like the game theory, the plays, for this price, I'm just so you guys know, like, do it for a month, dude. Like, come into our Discord. I promise you, you will not find a better Discord in terms of game theory talk. Like, and that's for every sport, by the way. If we NHL, we kind of joke around about it, but like, there's no site that does NHL. So, I mean, I know people are like, who cares about NHL, NFL, and all that. NHL is a great fantasy sport. Everyone should play it. But even for NFL, like, you should just come join. It's cheap as hell. We approach this in a really, I think, thoughtful way. It's a really organic, good community. James has built a great thing. And if any of you who are listening, even if like 10% of you who are listening who aren't subs, it's 30 of you, thought that 10% of this was interesting, just fucking give it a shot for $35 for 1 month. I mean, I'm just, by the way, I'm saying that out of like logic. I don't make money off of Paydirt, right? So I just think it's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, look, $40 a month. Okay, so people will say that there's good values elsewhere, right? But $40 a month is not just for NFL. It is for MLB, NFL, PGA, experimental models, esports, NBA, NHL, NCAAF, NCAAB, tennis, research sheets as well. The best game log models in the industry for NBA. The best. I have game logs and team matchups for NHL. NFL research sheets, MLB, PGA. I mean, like, there's so much shit that you can get for $40. So come give us a try. And look, if you don't want to do a month, there's a $5 day pass. Like, just come try things out. I'm sure that you'll like it. I'm sure that you'll enjoy it. Anyway, also like and subscribe. Yeah, good fucking call out here. I don't push the YouTube channel as much as I should. I made a TikTok the other day. I have to start. We're gonna start streaming.
We need one of those producers, cookies or whatever, who like, there's like the sound effects when we say stuff, and then people click on it, like and subscribe. Like,
we do need that.
I'm the resident old, so I don't even know what any of that means. But,
Pablo's 100. But we do need that. I need to start pushing things more. We're gonna start streaming TikTok next week as well, which will be fun. But just come give the site a try out. We appreciate all the support. I appreciate all the support. Hopefully we can take some things down tomorrow and have a better week. We've had some okay weeks at Paydirt, but we haven't had that like explosion week yet. So hopefully this is the week. I'm going to take down a 6-figure win tomorrow and it's all going to be okay. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. We love you. Y'all are awesome. And if you have any questions, hit us up in the Discord. We're getting out of here. Adios.
Good luck.